Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for always coming out and supporting our family association meeting. And today we have another amazing topic to talk about for brain science in children and adolescents. So thank you for all who are at home, and we're going to give it to the ladies.
All right, so our presentation today is about brain science and the preschool through 8 learner. And the topic came about because we always choose campus goals each year. And in the previous year, we were thinking about what our students need and what our teachers need. And one of the things that we noticed was that kids are increasingly interested in how their bodies work. I think they always have been, but when we survey them, for example, we had a wellness retreat last year with middle school students. And one of the things that they said was, we want to learn more about nutrition and our bodies and the chemicals in our brains because we want to know why we feel this way, or we want to know why we need these things at school. They always want to know the why. And so it's really important for us to follow what they think they need. And it also can help us as better parents. I'm saying us because we're parents in this room, and also when we work with students at school. There's a lot of studies that show that if students are not actually physically and mentally ready to learn, no matter how good the teacher is, or no matter how ready that student is academically, if their body and their brain are not ready and they're not regulated, it's not going to go in. It's not going to sink in. And so we did a lot of work over the summer. We did a lot of work pre-summer. The teachers did a lot of work over the summer to prepare different campus goals. And so I'm going to let Kelly talk a little bit about those. But the agenda for today, and some of you, just a show of hands, are any of you familiar with brain science and how it might work with your children?
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit? Okay. Self. Okay. All right. So Jess, can you go to the next slide? Mm-hmm. So here are the different things that we're going to work through today. The first one is like brain foundations and why we're focused on this, which I've dipped into a little bit. And then we break our SEL classes and ways that we do things a little bit into groups. So preschool through 3rd grade sees Dr. Hunt. So Dr. David Hunt is the counselor who comes from the downtown campus this year. He is a licensed psychologist and he is fantastic. So he is what was Miss Jackie teaching those SEL classes is what he is doing now. And so in preschool through 3rd grade, we're focusing on self-awareness. There's a lot of modeling and explicit teaching of what's happening in your body, what's happening in your brain, and what it feels like. And then also a lot of modeling and using adult support. So you're going to hear the words regulation, dysregulation, co-regulation. And younger students, although older students need this too, adults sometimes need it, but co-regulation and the ways that we can help children do the things to get them back into, basically back into the green zone. And then 4th through 8th grade, I don't know if many of you have probably heard me talk before, but these books are all out here. If you don't have this book, please get it. So you actually get yardsticks because they are linked to the responsive classroom things each year. But the things that are most helpful in a book like this, it will tell you, like, for example, last year my child was 9 and he was falling, he was tripping. And it actually was a typical thing of 9-year-olds because their muscles and their body are growing so quickly that they're literally like Gumby. They're barely holding themselves together. And so the stitches in the lip, tripping over things, falling, actually was typical. And so this book, every time that I teach a new group of students, or if my children are getting older, it has things that you can watch out for in terms of social things, mental, like how you take care of their mind, how you take care of their bodies, how you can help them navigate friendships. So if you do not read this book, this is something that we go back to every single year. The teacher homework actually before conferences every year is to go back and read their section. And they actually put out new editions of the book every once in a while. So there's actually several editions of it. And so that piece about the adolescent brain, we've studied a lot about, and it's fascinating. If I think back on my teenage years and what we know now, or what I know now about teenagers, it helped me. It helped my parents so much. We have a little bit of a dip into resilience. So one of the things that our campus does well is outdoor ed. And there's a lot of reasons why we do that. And so we wanted to share that with you in terms of how it connects to the growth mindset and working through different challenges. And even if it's not hiking or climbing or doing an outdoor ed thing, students actually can connect what they know from being in those processes to stuff that they do at school. And then finally, we have a take home for you that I hope you'll find valuable. It has a couple tidbits for like easy takeaways that you can apply for yourself, for your relationships, for your student or your students and your kids at home. So we're excited to share with you today. And I printed very small, so if we're squinting, but there are a lot of details and we wanted to make sure that we didn't skip anything, so we put our presenter notes on it. I messed up on that part, so.
We're gonna need microscopes.
If you wanna go to the next slide. So our 3 campus themes for the summer reading were the brain science in children and adolescents, which Megan already spoke about. And then we also talked about anxiety in children. So that's something that we're seeing a lot. That's something that has been talked a lot, especially post pandemic. And just that idea, they're all intertwined, actually, these 3 topics, right? So like that is one aspect of the what's going on in a brain. And so both thinking about how can we reduce triggers for anxiety, but also, again, if a child is feeling anxiety in the classroom, they're not going to learn or perform as well as they would if they were in a calm state. And then the last one is universal design for learning. So again, similar, and that's the idea that there can be lots of different entry points and lots of different paths for students to get to the end learning goal. And both planning ahead and thinking about what paths might be best for your students and how to engage them, whether it's like this is going to be a hands-on lesson or maybe it's a partner lesson, and then also how they interact with the topic and what the end result will be. But always getting, so you sort of start with what's my end point and then thinking out there are lots of different paths to get there. So the 2 books that were the main options for brain science were The Whole Brain Child and 10 to 25. The Whole Brain Child we recommended for our preschool to 3rd grade teachers, and 10 to 25 was 4 through 8. Obviously, specialists we encourage to think about where they might want to focus their learning. So these were the 2, and we'll talk about it a little more, but The Whole Brain Child, it provides 12 practical strategies to turn everyday emotional moments, which are tantrums, fears, into opportunities to help children use all the different parts of their brain. So how to help them work through that. 10 to 25, my children now fall into that category. So I read both, but this one really got me thinking. So it's talking about shifting from, or shifting into a mentor mindset. So kind of working along with your child and helping them experience things instead of preventing them from experiencing things or solving problems for them.
And the 10 to 25 alludes to their ages. The 10-year-olds to 25-year-olds.
Next slide. So this is sort of how we approach SEL here, and a lot of other schools do this, but we have our own sort of way of doing it here. So we have all of the pieces that we'll talk about today are the colored pieces right outside the middle, and then thinking about how that looks in classrooms, in the campus as a whole and the school as a whole, and then obviously bringing families in, which is what we were hoping to do today. So we can hopefully share some language and what's happening in the school. Next slide. All right, so this is where it gets in. Oh, this is you. We can talk about it. Are you sure? Yeah. Okay. I'll do the next one. So one of the things that we talk about a lot are the different parts of the brain. So it's really neat to see younger students especially talk about their amygdala. So that's that emotional alarm system, fight, flight, freeze, fawn. I had not heard about the fawn response until about a year ago, and it made a lot of sense to me. So that's where instead of doing the first 3, the person tries to please or just like make the thing that's elevating their emotions or their state go away, right? So just how can I please the environment, the person to make it go away? I think the rest of those are self-explanatory. The hippocampus, that's where memory, learning, and context processing happens. So again, if the amygdala is elevated, then the hippocampus can't do its work. And that's where learning happens, along with the prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking part of our brain. And that's decision-making, things like that. And then we also sort of campus-wide really take a look at things, thinking about embodied cognition. So all of our flexible seating options, and some of the tools that our teachers use to help students when they are feeling dysregulated, just looking at movement, resetting attention, and really optimizing learning. So our students do best when they're not just, stuck in a chair and thinking about how they need to look like they're listening. Anything you want to heads up? Yes? I'm looking at my friend. Hi. Do you want to jump in?
Sure.
So we had a couple
Your
moments.
kids will always
Sorry.
come first, sorry.
Yeah.
I need to chat. Did you guys just go over these three parts of the break?
Yeah. The next slide was going to be yours anyway. You want to do it?
Sure, yeah. Okay. So is this the?
It's the upstairs bench.
Yeah. So obviously we talk about SEL, especially in fourth and fifth grade. I know Dr. Hunt and Miss Jackie here at Swain were also teaching these things to the kiddos. And pretty much the downstairs and upstairs brain is just like we were talking about, the hippocampus, the amygdala, and the prefrontal cortex. So the kiddos learn like the hand flipping our lid. The Dr. Siebel, he was a clinical psychiatrist at UCLA that kind of coined flipping our lid to that big emotional dysregulation. And pretty much it talks about how the amygdala gets disconnected to the prefrontal cortex, like they stop talking. So when the amygdala thinks there's, big emotion or stress or fear, it'll turn on. And then your prefrontal cortex and your hippocampus go offline. So we talk about that a lot in school, so kiddos can help regulate, figure out, we talk about strategies they can work on when that happens, but also just how it's really hard to learn and be at school when those big emotions come up. So yeah, the downstairs brain is pretty much that amygdala, the emotion center of the brain. And then the upstairs brain is that part that helps you think clearly and learn. So yeah.
If you remember, there's actually like a symbol. So this is your amygdala. And so if your lid is flipped, you're trying to calm yourself, you're trying to regulate yourself into a place where you can put it back on.
Yeah.
So that is.
So if you like
All the parts are
Google,
working
Dr. Siegel has this little hand model that we teach the kiddos. So pretty much that prefrontal cortex, which is right behind our forehead, the kiddos kind of know where that is now in their brain, will flip. And then that amygdala is kind of taking over the watchdog, kind of the guard dog, to make sure that, when we talk about how amazing the amygdala is, but also it can be like inaccurate. So being on stage or presenting in class or anything that kind of makes them feel a little bit nervous can start to have the amygdala turn on. So we can learn ways to also make it a little bit more accurate. So
Question, are they actively using those symbols or signals when?
we talk about flipping your lid a lot. That's definitely a common vocabulary we talk about, but I'm really much more, I want the kiddos to know those three parts of the brain. So we talk about the amygdala, and even now, like with my fifth and sixth graders and even middle school kids, I'll say, what did we talk about last week at school or in SEL? And they'll tell me, I'm like, okay, you just used your what part of your brain? And they all know. My hippocampus, which is, I talk about it being like your memory saver, your iCloud or Google Drive. So they are constantly kind of being assessed, like that language we use all of the time. So we'll talk about, how we'll get into zones of regulation next, and we talk about how those parts of the brain are also a part of that SEL framework.
When my son was in second grade, so that was 2 years ago, he just randomly one day was like, my amygdala is not talking to my thinking brain. And, I was a teacher. I didn't know what he was learning. And I was like, hey, I'm going to look up amygdala to make sure I understand what you're saying at the time. But that was all, the SEL curriculum and him being able to identify that he was a little frustrated right then.
So the younger kids may use, instead of amygdala, even though they should, we're teaching them that word, they use watchdog. The prefrontal cortex is kind of your thinking brain or the wise owl. And then your hippocampus, which we always have these funny discussions, is your elephant. And they're like, why isn't it a hippopotamus? That would make more sense. I'll talk about how elephants apparently have really great memories, which is why they correlate those two things. So the younger grades may use those animals as more of the language, but the older grades are all using amygdala, hippocampus, and prefrontal cortex, or PFC for short. Yeah.
Before we go to the next slide, I want to give a plug. So one of the things, being a teacher, you learn a lot about a brain, and you keep reading different books, and they say some similar things. One of the things that was different in this book is that they have a whole chapter on memories. which I feel like now that my kids see pictures on my phone and we have different ways of remembering things, it's actually rewiring how their brains work. And so there's all different tools for how, and there's actually, this book actually has little cartoons for those graphic novel lovers that you could actually show your kids. But it's basically all the different parts of your brain, and that includes how memories are created. And how memories can be kind of shifted based on things that you talk about all the time, or what you see, or a picture that you know. And it's really interesting if you think about kids and the truths that they tell and their own stories or perspectives versus what an adult might see. I thought that chapter was really interesting and relevant.
And again, in the earlier slides, did we go over like the castle, the 5 SEL competencies?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna come back to them.
Okay.
Yep. All right, so one of the things that we wanted to share with you, and this is actually part of what's on your handout for what you can take home later, is that, especially for little kids, but it still happens for big kids, is a need for the adult to be the person who is the calmest person in the room. And so I'll throw myself under the bus here and say, there are times when I'm tired and I go home and I'm stressed, or things have to happen, or we're trying to leave the house, and I have flipped my lid in more ways than one. And so I think part of what, as a parent, we can provide for our children is that space where it's actually normal to do these things, but you can also share with them like how you're feeling and help them to realize that A, it's normal, and B, how can we work on this to help us regulate ourselves? And so there are many moments, it's called co-regulation, which basically is just you regulate yourself first. And sometimes that means you take a walk. You get a drink. There are a lot of different tools that we can share with you. But there are things that they're a little bit like stalling techniques, but it's also a moment to just give yourself a breath. Take a breath so that you don't react in a way that's like, whoa, when that's really what you want to do. But in order for them to get where you need to go, or for you to leave the house, or for someone to put their shoes on, sometimes that co-regulation needs to happen first. There's also physical things that kids can need. One example, and I'm forgetting what my daughter was really upset about the other day. It could have been random. It was probably what bow she was going to wear in her hair, and she couldn't find it. And she was so upset, so sad, so mad at me. And finally, I just looked at her and I was like, "Do you need a hug?" And she was like, "Yes." and it's the love that and the connection that you give, but it's also the physical input. She needed a squeeze to be like, okay. And I needed it too, let's be honest. So there are different things and different tools that you can use based on the moment where they actually are co-regulation. They're good for both of you. They're good for each person that's in it. So the main thing is to manage yourself first. And then also the second tool here I think is really interesting. It's called name it to tame it. So there's a lot of SEL work done about naming a feeling, or naming what do you notice, what do you see, what do you feel. And so if your child, and this is the part where the younger they are, that you are going to name it for them. I noticed that you look angry. Can you tell me why you feel angry? I noticed that you look a little bit sad. Your body is showing me that you're a little bit tired. You're a little bit sad. Tell me about that. Let's name it so then we can figure out what to do. It could be something as simple as it's Friday morning and everybody's dragging to get out of bed, and you are in the blue zone, which we're going to learn about in a little bit, and you're really low energy. I noticed that you're looking a little bit low. Like, what can we do about that? Which could be, let's do some jumping jacks. Let's get our blood flowing. Let's have a conversation about something that excites you so you can bring your energy level up. So naming it is the first thing. Using the logic center, which it's sometimes when your lid is flipped, or when you are in a regulated or unregulated, dysregulated is the correct word, state, getting yourself back to being actually able to talk about it. Sometimes kids, when they are so in the full-blown throes of whatever that looks like, most of your kids are not in the tantrum age, but there are moments where they are so mad, so angry, so upset, they can't articulate what's going on. And so sometimes it means, let's sit down and take a couple deep breaths. And there's a couple different techniques for how you do that and how intensely they need help. And then let's talk about logically, what do we need to do? And sometimes you don't even get to this until a half hour later, because if you try to engage with them when they're, or you are, it's actually not going to work. You're going to have to redo it. And that will take double the time.
I think one of the things that in looking at co-regulation, I would say at home, I'm pretty regulated at school, but at home, sometimes my family gets me dysregulated. It's their fault. And I can't just, as we were saying, like, I can't just be calm. I can't do it. And it took me a while and like reading these books and thinking about it and literally sitting down when I was calm, other times like, okay, what do I do? And sometimes that looks like me saying, I am really frustrated right now and I can't do these things and I need to sit here. Do you see that my voice is like, ugh, and like my hands are, and I have seen my kids then like, and I do lots of things wrong, right? But it feels like I'm doing okay with this. I've seen my kids then mirror that back to me. Like they'll get really upset and then they'll be like, I know I need to do what you're saying, but I can't right now. And it's like, okay, like now we have a place to start working from. So I think that's just important to remember. We look at, I think we kind of understand that as when we look at kids, but giving yourself that space sometimes to talk through it and acknowledge how you're feeling too is actually modeling it for them. And it really is helpful for them learning how to do these things on their own, because that's the end goal, right?
The other example I can share is, I find myself talking to myself, meaning like to my children out loud often, and sharing with them things that if I'm going to use picture day, for example, right? So picture day, raise your hand if picture day is super fun in your house. Trying to find all the parts, making sure your pants fit, you have your dress shoes on, are you actually wearing a belt or socks or whatever. And we're never on time. And so on those days, I know that my stress level is high because I would actually like to do my own hair and get ready for school too. And so all of that, and all of this is happening, and we're trying to be on time, and we're trying to, like go to work. And in that moment, I've said to them, do you notice what I look like? Do you notice that my voice has changed? Do you notice that I feel stressed and we're rushing? What are ways that we could do this differently next time? And they'll say like, oh, we should get our clothes out the night before, or, we should do this or we should do that. But also like, it's okay. And if I'm in that moment and I turn on an audiobook in the car on the way there because I need to have a moment, that's okay. But sharing with them how I feel, that is co-regulation. You're showing what it is and you're showing how you are regulating yourself. The other piece that we're going to dip into this a little bit actually with the next slide, but one of the things as students get older, and if you have a child who's going into middle school or has had a 4th, 5th conference where they've done the student-led conferences, you will hear some of these words repeated as the child is becoming more self-aware. So as they get more self-awareness and they figure these things out, then they are able to advocate for themselves and figure out what do I need, because it's not the same. One of the pieces that I would say, no matter what you take away from this, is how you speak to your child about when they feel dysregulated. Kids look at me like I'm crazy when we talk about these things, but everybody's body reacts differently. If you are stressed, you can literally, and they don't know how to articulate this, but you can literally feel your pulse and your body and your blood flowing. Some people sweat, some people turn red, some people just literally freeze. They don't know what to do. And so helping a child see either that in you or see that and notice in themselves what they do. Some kids run away, they flee. What you do in that moment and then what you do about it, because you can't always flee in moments, or you can't, being really sweaty in a moment is fine for a moment, but it's not good long term. So helping them identify what that looks like when they're not in the green zone, which is going to take us into the next part now.
So we just started zones of regulation with 4th and 5th grade. And so we talk about emotions, right? The name entertainment, we also talk about how no feelings are good or bad. Some of them are comfortable and some of them are uncomfortable. We talked about the kiddos are really good and versed about that, about an uncomfortable feeling is something like sadness or anger, something that presents in your body that doesn't feel good. Maybe again, like your heart's beating fast, you're getting sweaty, or with sadness, you feel tired, or you don't, you just feel down in the dumps. And we talk about what those cues are. So similar to the emotions, we talk about how your zones, there's no good or bad zones. There's an ideal zone to learn. And we talk, and this is where we pull in the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus, and they know that their prefrontal cortex and their hippocampus have to be on to really learn and hear the information and then recall it. So the green zone is kind of what we talk about is like this, if we can get ourselves the closest to the green zone, then we're at optimal time to learn. It's the best time for us to learn. But we talk about how sometimes we come into school and we're not in the green zone. Maybe we came in that something happened at home, a pet sick, right? And you're feeling really sad about that. You come into school and you're in the blue zone. So with the zones of regulation, we kind of split up the emotions actually today in SEL, the fourth and fifth grade, the A kiddos, they're like split up, A and B weeks are doing, I give them a ton of different emotions and they have to put them on a red piece of cardstock, a green, blue, and yellow, and kind of try to figure out in small groups which emotion goes where. Because one of the pieces about this is energy levels and also alertness. So the green is that your energy is just right. You're not tired, you're not, feeling exhausted, but you're not super, super energetic, right? If you're really silly, you're not in the green zone. So we talk about your energy levels as well. And then alertness, right? Your green is like you want to be alert for class, but you don't want to be on high alert, which you may be when your amygdala starts to take over, right? The energy level's too high, you're really like fixated on something, specifically that emotion. And again, you're dysregulated. These are some, but the red zone also has more comfortable emotions, right? So feeling like elated or overjoyed is too much energy, and that's in the red zone. When we're feeling that way, we can't go like we were saying hi later today.
Oh, yeah.
The kids are gonna be really, really pumped and then really going to be really high, but they're not going to be able to be learning at that. So again, that is why
It's 2:35.
yeah. So that's to show that, the red zone isn't good or bad. It's just that there's energy levels that are super high and emotions that kind of fall in there. Same with blue, like you could be sad or tired. That's not a positive thing or negative thing. It just is, right? So they talk about so this is that self-awareness piece, figuring out this I think is the hardest part for the younger students is noticing those body cues, checking in. Is my heart racing? Am I getting sweaty? Or those come with time and really like that self-awareness piece. We're doing like emotion charades as well. They love that. To kind of see also not just themselves and self-awareness, but social awareness too. If I'm looking at my classmates, I can tell by their body language and facial expressions how they're feeling. And then zones regulation also helps us next the self-management piece. Okay, how am I feeling? What zone am I in? Name it to tame it. Am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling worried? Am I feeling frustrated or annoyed? What zone is that? And then the next piece is how do I get closest to the green zone? So if I come in the blue zone, it's okay, but you're not going to do breathing techniques while you're in the blue zone. Well, there's one that I teach the kids, so like get energy, but mostly, use breathing to kind of regulate and calm down the nervous system. So in the blue zone, we may do movement, or I have little trampolines in my room, or there's other things we can do, or getting outside, getting fresh air, grabbing a cold sip of water can wake you up. So we talk about that self-management piece as well. So again, kiddos starting to really think about where they are in the zone, what's the feeling, and then how do we manage and figure out what coping strategy to use to get us closest to the thing. And some days we're not always going to be in the room for class, and that's okay too. So I really love the zones of regulation. Again, I think it really helps students identify, take inventory of how they're feeling, and then figure out what they need to do, which is that self-advocacy piece as well. Like, what do I need to do in this moment to be able to focus in class or stay in? Okay. And I was just going to say something kind of what Megan and Kelly both talked about. We all flip our lids. Like I'm a counselor and I at home also flip my lid. I think it's just the stress of living in 2025. I think also just when those things happen, modeling what happened in your body, taking a moment, being curious, like, wow, this was the situation that made me think this thought. And this is what happened in my body. You obviously solve that, right? And then like, how do I repair and talk about it in a way that, again, we're giving those kiddos the vocabulary and the words and also normalizing that it happens to all of us, and that you talk about when we flip our lid with, I'm always just like, this happens to adults too. It happens to me, it happens to your parents. It's okay. We want to get better at it. It's always progress, not perfection. So
I do think one of the pieces that's actually not in the slides that I should point out is that though not being regulated is normal, you are responsible for the behavior that you inflict, whether it's your words, whether it's your actions, whether it's a physical thing. And so there are times when I have to say to my kids, I'm really sorry that my tone did not sound, or the words that I use, that's not actually what I meant. And so like the impact of what that is still you're still responsible for it, which I think is also a really important lesson where I didn't mean that, but that's the way it felt for you, and I'm really sorry. Or physical things, or, you know. The other piece I was gonna add, I have vivid memories of, have any of you ever seen the pictures of kids at a pep rally here? They're like, whoa! They're in the red. They are so far in the red, they're definitely not learning other than just how to cheer and have school spirit and all those things. But that's also a time where we're aware that like interesting stuff's always gonna happen because they are so far in a dysregulated zone that they're gonna need some help to come back down. So just helping them be aware of those things, and that's how at school, we're very aware of those things and how that could look in terms of what could happen.
Yeah. We talk a lot about like appropriate ways to respond to the zonings and feelings too, right? And I think parenting as well, we can say to a kiddo, hey, I can tell that you're feeling frustrated because of X, Y, and Z. You know, your voice is getting louder, your tone of voice is off. You may not do, you know, yell at your sibling, but let's give other options for them, like other strategies to kind of manage that. So I think we talk about that a lot in class as well. We also talk about like what's appropriate at school for coping strategy versus what's appropriate or what's available at school, you know, and home are different things as well. You know, like yelling at your pillow at home. Okay, can't do that at school. So we talk about like appropriateness and what's kind of available at school in terms of what coping skills or what, you know, regulation strategies we can use here.
And then we get to fourth grade and they start to be a little bit more aware of each other. So in the book 10 to 25, they talk about the social craving, right? So that shift, looking more at puberty is fueling desire for all of these lovely things that have to do with each other. And there's that heightened sensitivity to shame and embarrassment. So obviously the adults in the building need to be aware of that to help guide students through that. And also, again, trying to limit the situations where that might happen. And then also just that mentor mindset that I talked about on one of the beginning slides. And that's trying not to be the enforcer or protector and keeping your child from experiencing things, but being that mentor mindset where you're fostering transparency and able to be there talking them through things and guiding them. And, you know, there's a lot of research that shows that a very sort of trying to tell them exactly what to do, it does not foster their ability to be able to get through it. Next slide. So our advisory system is specifically in place to help with this whole process. They're getting to forge relationships with each other in a small group with two trusted adults, one or two trusted adults there. They're also able to form closer relationships with those adults. So, you know, sometimes it's not always the best, like a perfect match, but a lot of times there are strong relationships if that's like a home base for that child, to kind of help take care of them and guide them through things. And just working on that communication, navigating peer conflict productively. I feel like I should yell at one or something. That's at the crux of a lot of things. And just the self-advocacy. So we just had conferences and the advisors attended some of the conferences, and that was entirely to be that linchpin and hear where those students needed support so that then they could provide that support in advisory during Swain time and throughout the day so that they know, you know, what the challenges may be for a student and just building trust throughout our community. So working on those self-advocacy skills that Helene spoke about too.
The one thing I will add, and this is really hard to do as a parent, it's really hard to do as a person who works with kids every day, but middle school is a time when students want to make their own choices. They want to decide, they want to make big decisions. And so a couple of ways that we allow them to do that at school are through the music ensemble and elective programs. They get to choose which clubs they want to be a part of. There's sometimes where they choose an avenue for community service or something like that. And my advice to you is to let your child make the decisions. I think if it's something that is so impactful where it's like a big thing where you want them to be a part of PJAS or you want them to do something like that, that warrants a conversation. But very often, students are making a decision for a really good reason. And so if you talk about like, why did you choose this class? What was your thinking behind it? Half the time they're going to say because my friends chose it, and that's one discussion that you should have. But the other part of it might actually be a really good thing where your child has developed self-advocacy skills and are able to articulate it. I'll give a specific example that we lived through this year, which was we had students that were choosing their elective classes, and we have embedded PJAS, which is the Pennsylvania Junior Academy of Science, or like a science fair offering as a class. We had a student who is taking all of the highest level classes that they can take and is doing like, I forget how many activities outside of school, literally booked 5 hours every day after school. And this child chose to not do PJS during their elective time because they wanted to do something that would give their brain a break, that would build a different skill, that would allow them to be with different peers. And so they signed up for something different, and the parent tried to override it. And so we had a conversation with the child and their parent to say, because the child had articulated to us, like, this is why I chose this, but I'm afraid my mom's going to be mad at me. I know my mom's going to be mad at me. And so it became a really important discussion for us to have with that family about like, what are you actually looking for? What are you going to accomplish? And if so, yes, let's move forward with this choice and help your child understand why you believe this is right for them. But also your child is saying something. They're overwhelmed, they're tired, they need a break. And this is an opportunity that they are saying they need for themselves. So I think just in those moments, I'm not giving you guidance either way, but very often our kids are actually able to articulate what they want or need. And if they can't say that, then that's a different conversation about like, what do you think you want and what are your goals? But I think the kids are getting pretty good at it. And so I would just challenge you to listen because they know what they need to say. All right, so this is a fun one. There's actually a wheel in here. I don't know why that's so faint. But one of the things that we talk a lot about, and the next slide is going to be about outdoor education, but thinking about how students work through challenges. So the wheel is actually going all the way around. So when you run into a challenge, this could be a test that you didn't do as well on, or it could be a presentation or something that you were doing with an outdoor education challenge. But how you wire and how you work through situations actually changes the neural pathways in your brain. And so when you run into that difficulty, a growth mindset is enforced. Does anybody know there's my favorite 3-letter word? I can't do this. Anybody know?
Yeah.
Yet. I can't do this yet. I can't climb this tree yet. I can't master this math thing yet. And so it's a matter of, and the kids know that. Like I'm going to say I can't do this yet, but I'm going to, because my goal is to do this. And so the way that we speak about those challenges and say, like, oh, you didn't do so well, or you really stunk at that, or that kid is not as good at that. Those are ways that students are listening and our kids are hearing us on the soccer field, on the basketball court, in classrooms. When you talk about a project and you're looking at different projects and the outcomes, they hear every single thing. So thinking about praising effort, choosing persistence, and how we speak about that is really important because it will create healthy neural pathways in the brain. And each time they choose something over quitting, they're using their upstairs brain. They're trying to make sure that they're using that logical part.
I think a really important thing about this is that wheel only happens if they get to struggle and maybe fail. So it's so hard to see your kid have a tough time, right? Like it's so hard to see them fail or struggle or not live up to the potential that you know that they have. But they truly learn more when they go through that process, and you can do it with them, that mentor mindset, right? Like you can along the way be guiding them and like, oh, well, that's a lot less than you wrote on your last paper. Is that, is there a rubric? Like what did your teacher say? And try to pull those things out, but then letting them have the consequence or not do as well. Then you'd go back and say, okay, how can we do this better next time? And you work with them instead of the like, you didn't meet my expectations. It's so hard to let that happen to your child. But it's a really meaningful process for them. And you're also sending them the message that they can do it because you're letting them try. So if we're jumping in and like, here, let me do this for you, they're internalizing a message that maybe they can't do it on their own.
The other piece that I think is a challenging thought, but I would invite you to think about is that many adults can often point out what point school became really difficult. At what point did I fail a test? Did I not have something that I needed? Did I not bring my jersey to a soccer game? My mentality of that is let it happen in fourth, fifth, sixth grade. Let them fall. Because by the time you get to seventh grade, to eighth grade, to ninth grade, either A, they don't want to ask for your help. B, they're not going to tell you what's wrong. Or C, it's harder to fix. And so I think that's the part where I'm in the moment. My child is 10 and I have another one who's 7. It's really hard to watch them forget their homework. Or my son got dragged down a little bit because he had to wear sneakers one day at a soccer game because he forgot his cleats. But he's in 5th grade. Nobody cares. But he remembers because his teammates were like, Joey, we need you. Pack your bag tonight. But Jamal Stewart was like, Joey, you got to pack your bag the night before, man. Because then you're going to be ready for the game. We need you on the field with your cleats on. And he remembers that, right? So but he's in 5th grade and he has messed up. And so I think that's the part where in the moment of like, we have to leave the house or we have to do these things, it's okay to let them. Which is kind of the next slide, because it's going to link to the outdoor education program. So this program was developed because we believe in students being outside and we believe in students having all of these different skills with student agency and self-advocacy, but there are 3 really important little phrases in the middle there that kind of relate to the zones of regulation. But when we are on an outdoor ed trip, whether we're hiking up the Appalachian Trail, we're going up on a ropes course, there are 3 different words that you might use to describe how you are feeling or how a child is feeling in the moment and how it's impacting their brain. You might be in your comfort zone. You might be in a challenge zone, or you might be in a panic zone. So if you picture, have any of you been on a ropes course? Okay, so if you picture what the Blue Mountain ropes course looks like, and this looks very different for different people, but I'll give a personal example. When Dr. Webster was here, I challenged Dr. Webster to get as far up in the ropes course as we could possibly go. And so that course has 4 levels. And comfort was 1 or 2. It was a little bit off the ground. Some of the challenges were they were hard, but they weren't impossible. By the time you got to 3 and 4, you're way up in the treetops. Your heart is racing. You're really hoping you don't fall. You are tied in. But that is the panic zone where you have to decide, is this actually worth it? Am I actually going to beat Dr. Webster and being the highest up in the tree, or is it not worth it? And talking to your students and your kids about when you were on this outdoor ed trip, not the mixed one, for example, and you're climbing up in this ropes course. I had a student who literally got to the tree, could not get out on the tightrope because she was panicking. She was literally hyperventilating. She's like, I can't do it yet. And she got back up and she did it. And so I think there are really powerful messages in how we talk about that and how we rewire our brain to be adventurous. Because if you are not adventurous, you're not going to figure it out. You're not going to be curious enough to actually try again, which is really important. That's how you build resilience. That's how you build kids who are aware of their own challenges. And the other piece at the bottom here, the empathetic and compassionate learners, to be able to watch a group of students. So I'll use that student example again, who barely could get up in the tree. Every other person who was either belaying her or watching was cheering for her because they wanted her to be able to do it. There wasn't a prize that everyone got up and did the challenge, but they wanted her, they knew that her goal was to do this and then they cheered for it. So I think that's the piece where the empathy, not everyone's at the same place. Not everyone has the same comfort level, but how we can build those skills to either do the challenge or to raise your peers up to actually achieve their goals, I think is really important. And I think you all are raising great kids who do that. So thank you. Yeah. No, okay. We have to talk a little faster.
Okay, so this is just looking at preschool through 8th grade. These are some of the SEL competencies that we have talked about. So the CASEL stands for Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. So these are part of how we help support our students, because again, if we're not succeeding in these areas and creating an environment where students feel like they're mostly in the green zone or they can navigate the other zones, then there won't be a lot of true learning happening.
But we have
It's terrifying.
this is so fun.
No one's gonna listen to me. Swain. I can't compete. So the idea with this was to just see the thread that we've already spoken about, where like self-awareness, initially we're just looking at identifying feelings and causes, and then we're moving on to zones and also personal learning style and needs. Because yes, we want to equip our students to navigate the moment they're in right now, but the big goal is that they can go out in the world and know, like, I'm going into a situation that makes me feel a little bit less calm. And I struggle with this, and I have coping tools to get through this. And I've done it before with help, with mentorship. I can do it. So the scaffolding through all of them, like social awareness, we're hoping that the end goal is reading social context, being able to navigate those difficult situations, because it's not just about what's going on with you. You have to be able to read the situation and know what's going on with others. So I don't think it makes sense to read through the whole slide, but just scaffolding from that self-management to complex decision-making that adults have to make all the time. Okay, here are your tools. So just that idea of being the co-regulator, using tools, whether it's taking a breath, taking a walk, talking, oh no, we're formatted, it's poorly, sorry. And just thinking about the fact that your calmness is the first tool your child needs, and that maybe you need to take a little bit of time to get through that state of calm. Praising effort and process. So this is one I think about a lot, but things like, I see how hard you worked, instead of I'm so smart. Because what happens is, if it doesn't go well the next time, then there's some kind of realization, if you use the first example of what could I have done differently? Not, I'm not smart. And obviously we want kids to be able to have that growth mindset and work through it. It's not a character flaw, it's not a failing, it's something that they can work on and improve on. So just wiring the brain for that. And then we have what's behind this one? We have a take home that summarizes some of these things. Let me hand them out.
Yeah.
And the idea of yet. Jess, if you want to go to the last slide.
Yeah.
Almost there.
I have a question, but I just wanted to give a shout out because in Miss Fish and Miss Geiser's class, we had a kid get hurt recently. And some of the kids were very upset about it. And they did an amazing job at regulating them and identifying how they felt. And they sat them down and wrote notes, and within an hour, those kids were fine. They processed it properly, and yeah. So I just wanted, I was amazed at how well those teachers handled it.
Yeah, thank you, I agree. And I know they paused, they obviously had plans for their classes, but that was just really good, pro move that they understood that their students were not ready to learn right then.
Yeah.
They had
Yeah.
That's the awareness of the adult, though, to be able to say,
Yeah.
in an emergency situation, you have so much adrenaline coursing through you.
Well, that was the
They
other
need
thing too. I
to
mean,
know, too.
they did share with the kids how they felt too, which I was very happy about. Yeah, so that was, yeah.
On the last slide, I think it said something about, obviously being the co-regulator. One of the things that I try to, like a tip I give parents, and I think it's really important, like, when you see your kiddo dysregulated, our first go-to is like, calm down. So a lot of times what I try to change the language is like, we need to calm your amygdala down. So they immediately connect with, there's nothing wrong with me, right? This is just my brain doing what every other brain does. So that again, they're like, kind of, you're helping them recognize like your amygdala's on. We need to regulate that first. So it really takes it like not out of shame based, but into more of like, this happens to everyone's brain, and this is brain science, and this is the part of the brain that's on, and we just need to calm it down. So we talk about that a lot, but I think that helps parents too, and the kiddos receiving that message, because I have so many kiddos at the moment they hear calm down, they're like, but I can't, or what's wrong with me that I'm not calm? So I think again, just using just a really quick change of language can really be helpful. And I think knowledge is power for kiddos. So once they learn this information and they know that this is how the brain works, and it works for everyone, it is really empowering for them. So.
We also have a fun shelf. So this is for our Zoom friends too. There's a whole shelf in the back over there of books that we have read as faculty or that families are welcome to borrow. I know people like audiobooks too. Many of these can actually be listened to. And they also have really good tools. So most of them actually, like this guy has a fridge printout. It's a little bit more dry. Ours is prettier, let's be honest. But there are tools that can be really helpful. And they're like short 1 or 2 pagers that for if you're looking for advice about a teenager or you're looking for advice about a specific age kid, they're really helpful tools. So you all are welcome to use them. They belong to the school. And so if you want or you're looking for something, feel free to ask because we are happy to help.
Apologies, I came in late, so if you have any questions for me.